Today I'm going to have a little calm chat about the frenzy surrounding everything moving onto cloud and why maybe it's not the best thing for your business to do. Let me let you in on a little secret. Most software that does everything we could ever want it to do has already been written. Honestly, I'm rapidly forming the opinion that cloud computing is turning into one of the biggest technology scams of the 21st century. Hiya folks, welcome back to the Small Business Toolbox, where we are just having a look at the nuts and bolts of self-employed life. Mostly in the UK, but sometimes we touch on the odd international topic, and this video is certainly one of those topics that applies pretty much wherever you are in the world. I'm Andy Mack and I've been self-employed for like ages. I feel so old. But today all I wanted to have a bit of a rant about, and I don't often get ranty on this channel, but I think this topic deserves a bit of a rant. And if you're just getting into business, or even if you're an established business owner, this is something you need to take really seriously, because you could end up in serious problems later down the line. And I'll explain some of those problems later on in this video. But what I'm chatting about is this crazy proliferation of using cloud-based software for everything. And this is one of the few topics I actually feel quite qualified to talk about, because I was literally operations manager for the cloud division of a large IT company in the UK, and it was my job to sell cloud services to businesses. So it's something I'm very well aware of how the model works and why businesses choose to go down that model. And to be clear from square one, I'm not saying don't put anything on the cloud. There are certain things that work really well on the cloud, and it would be massively hypocritical of me to turn around and say don't put anything on the cloud, keep it all local. There are many benefits to storing your business data on a cloud-based kind of platform. Things like general data storage, you know, your Dropboxes and OneDrives and that sort of thing, they can work really well for small businesses. It means that you're no longer having to worry quite so much about backups, although I'll come to that in a separate, maybe a separate whole video about that, because online backups are amazing, but don't seem to have moved on at all in the last 10 to 15 years by what I can gather. Online backups, instead of backing up to your own physical storage, you rent storage space off a data center and back up to there instead. Certainly by the online backup platforms that I've tried within the last 1 to 2 years. Come on, who's developing these systems? This was mature technology 10 years ago when I was getting out of IT, and it's still buggy as hell. And I mean, apart from anything else, tell me one major UK provider of cloud-based backups. I mean, I'm very well aware that there's companies who do it. Why isn't there like a Backblaze, but in the UK? Anyway, don't get us started on that one. That's a whole different kettle of fish. Let me have a cup of coffee. Infrastructure as a service in general, I think, is a very positive move, and it makes a lot of sense. So infrastructure as a service, instead of owning a physical computer that's sitting there doing nothing most of the time, you rent computing power from a data center. But what I do have a problem with is software vendors moving on to cloud-based licensing models for no reason whatsoever other than to boost the profits of the company and to tie you into using that vendor for the rest of time. I think in many cases it's a really bad model for certain types of software, and I also think it's often quite deceptive the way the companies are trying to get you onto these platforms, where they maybe get you on for free and then you like upgrade it a little bit and upgrade it a little bit, and then suddenly 2 years down the line you realise that you're completely locked into using that platform for the rest of time. So I'm hopefully just going to give you a couple of tips of things that I think you should look out for as a business owner, so you don't end up in a situation later down the line that could really jeopardize your business and put you in a position where you wish you'd never gone on cloud in the first place. And really, I think a lot of this stuff gives cloud computing a bad name, and I find it quite frustrating because, as I say, I was a complete cloud evangelist. I was banging on for ages about how everyone should be moving on to cloud-based systems, and I still stand by that. But I don't like the route that a lot of these software vendors are going down. Just to give you a couple of examples, I know Adobe gets picked on a lot for their creative cloud licensing model, but this is a very typical example. Back in the day, you could have bought Photoshop outright for, I don't know, 500 quid or thereabouts. But now, if you want to buy Photoshop, well, apart from anything else, you can't just buy it anymore. You'll see every single pricing plan that they do is a cloud-based kind of annual plan or a monthly plan. There's no outright purchase anymore. Outright purchases have completely gone. Everything is a subscription-based model now. And in my opinion, it's an absolute rip-off because the core functionality of the software hasn't really changed that much. And if you just want Photoshop on its own and you don't want to sign up to a yearly contract, so if you just want to go on the monthly plan, £30.34 a month. So I would expect software like this, if I was buying it outright, spending 500 quid or whatever on a piece of software, I would expect that to last at least 5 years before I'd need to entirely replace it. And even then, I might just pay for a periodic upgrade or something like that. But now, £30.34 per month, so it's £364 a year over 5 years. 1,820 quid? I don't think so. I mean, obviously what they're trying to do here is push you onto their annual plan where you get kind of everything as part of the all apps suite thing. But that would be £75.85 a month if you didn't sign up to their annual commitment. £75.85 a month. Over 5 years, that's £4,551. If you didn't want to sign up to the annual contract and you wanted all of the apps. As I say, I don't need it, not for the sort of thing I'm doing, so Photoshop's gone for me. So you need to weigh up the pros and cons of that for your business and certainly work out what happens to all the files that you've already created if you decide you're going to cancel this plan later down the line. Because as I say, they're all monthly or yearly plans, there's no option to buy it outright. So if you decide you're going to move off this plan, what happens with the stuff that you've already made in Photoshop if you want to edit it later down the line? Another prime example is SketchUp, made by Trimble, another giant multi-million-dollar company. SketchUp's for 3D modelling and that sort of thing. And again, their pricing model has completely gone down the cloud route and everything is now a yearly charge, and there's just no option, whether it's for professional use or personal use. There's no outright purchase anymore. There's SketchUp free, but that's a web browser based thing and it's awful. You certainly can't use it offline. In fact, if you go through this here, the one that's $119 a year, you can't use offline. So all of these are web browser based. If you want the standalone version, you've got to go to the $300 a year one. And then, as I say, what happens later down the line, if you decide you don't want the subscription anymore, but you want to edit one of your models that was produced on this version of the software. It's not great. And then if we look at the professional use, SketchUp Studio, a mere $1,200 a year, gets stuffed. There's essentially two major things that can go wrong for small businesses who are reliant on cloud-based systems to keep their businesses running. First of all, you're completely reliant on your internet connection, and most small businesses only have one internet connection. Big businesses have multiple internet connections, redundant connections through different providers, so that if one provider goes down, they can keep running through another provider. As a small business owner, you probably don't have that. And the second major problem is that you're absolutely in the hands of the vendors' systems, because if they go down, then you're equally stuffed. And please don't pretend that vendor systems don't go down, because, geez, all you have to look at is Facebook and Instagram. They have their own massive data centers with everything redundant and giant amounts of IT equipment. and they've had more outages than anyone I know over the last 6 months. So if companies like Facebook can't get it right with the infrastructure that they're running off, then don't pretend that you're not going to get outages on smaller platforms provided by smaller software companies. And sometimes if it's just for a minor piece of software, you can maybe go onto some sort of paper-based system temporarily, like for invoicing or something like that. You know, if you use like an online accountancy package, worst case scenario, you could probably generate an invoice offline. And a lot of these packages give you offline access to the software anyway. But more and more vendors are now going down the route of it only being web-based, or worse still, which I think is borderline criminal, is that they'll give you the desktop-based version of the software, but if that desktop-based version of the software can't connect to the internet and connect into the vendor, then it won't run. And that's shocking for a piece of software that you've bought. So it's constantly checking whether or not it's got a subscription. And the second that your internet goes down, you can't use it anymore, even though it's a piece of software on your own machine. I think that's terrible. I told you I was going to get ranty in this. So let me let you in on a little secret about this whole cloud computing frenzy. Sometimes cloud computing is right for your business and right for certain things that you do. Sometimes cloud computing is absolute marketing hype, and the companies that are selling you their solutions know that you would be better off keeping on the desktop solution that you're already on. I know that for a fact. They're pushing you onto these platforms because it keeps you tied in with a single vendor and it gives them a totally predictable income stream. It's nothing to do with it being of any benefit for your business. Because at the end of the day, back in the day when everyone bought physical software, you buy it and then that's generally it, and you stay on it until you need the next version. And that results in a very lumpy income stream for the software vendor. But software vendors love cloud-based income streams because it just gives them guaranteed income whether you're using the software or not. And the crazy thing is that you might think the software is a piece of junk and you come off it, and then you come to edit a file that you created in their software a year down the line, and you realise that you can't open it because you don't have the subscription anymore. So you have to activate the subscription again just so you can run the software to open the file that you created a year ago before you cancelled it because you thought it was a piece of junk. Oh, I get so angry about it. So as is normal with this channel, please do your own homework. Don't believe anything I'm saying. All I'm doing is lighting the blue touch paper so you can do your own research. You've heard it from one source, now dig into it and look into it from other sources as well. I'll include a couple of links in the video description in case you're struggling to find other sources. Do bear in mind that everyone banging on about cloud is probably trying to sell you cloud. And I'm saying that as a person who used to sell you cloud. But as I say, for certain things, it works really, really well. Data storage, high power data processing so that you don't have to buy your own supercomputer. Instead, you can use the processing power of someone else's supercomputer. It would be insane this day and age to buy your own supercomputer. Other stuff that cloud's really good for, data backups. But be aware that we are still limited by the size of internet connections, and because everyone seems to have really fast internet connections these days, we seem to have forgotten all about data efficiency and creating files that are sensible sizes. People are taking photographs with their phone that are of such high resolution that you could blow them up and put them on the side of a bus, when all they're doing is putting it onto Instagram as a 500 pixel square picture that would take up a 20th of the size if they understood the basics of image file compression and different image types and that sort of thing. Because of this, people have crazy amounts of data that they don't need to have, and the online backup systems can't cope with it. And that's why a lot of businesses don't end up moving on to online backups, which would be brilliant for them. But because they've never paid any attention to the file sizes that they're generating, suddenly their first seed backup that they have to run is going to take 2 months. And that's not a practical solution for anyone. And don't get me started about putting your business data onto a physical hard drive and posting it out to a company. absolute last resort, fine, but generally you shouldn't have to do that. That's a sticky plaster to fix a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place. What else is good for putting on the cloud? Music, I suppose, although it's completely destroyed the music industry. Video, obviously, because you wouldn't be watching this otherwise. But I think the key thing that you need to get your head around is having contingency plans in place for certain things that you're planning to run off cloud-based services, so that you can decide what you're going to do if your internet connection goes down or the vendor's systems go down. And God forbid the vendor goes out of business, because I don't know what you're going to do then. At least in the past, taking Photoshop as an example, at least if Adobe went bust now, I could still open and edit all of my Photoshop files from years and years ago because I bought the software. But if I signed up onto their Creative Suite platform and Adobe had problems and disappeared, what would happen to all of the stuff that I've generated on that platform? No idea. I would assume all of the stuff that I've spent hours and days and months creating will be lost. I don't know. Maybe you know the answer to that. But at the end of the day, if the software pulls to the internet and it won't run unless it can verify that you've got an account, and it can't do that anymore because the company's gone bust or whatever, then I'm guessing the software won't run anymore. And lordy, if it runs in a web browser, then obviously that's it, it's gone. If the company switches off those web servers because it doesn't exist anymore, or it just decides overnight it's going to change the licensing model from free to £200 a month, you're stuffed. Never mind creating new stuff, you're not even going to be able to open the stuff that you created when the platform was free. It's all about vendor lock-in, and the software manufacturers know that fine well, that you're going to be tied to them forever. And once you're locked in, they can do whatever they want with the pricing model, because you're stuffed. You've created everything on that platform. It's not as if you're going to be spending months and months creating it all again on a different platform. And if you think that's a good thing, fill your boots. I don't. So my personal preference is that I almost never use cloud-based software as a service, because I just don't trust the companies not to screw me, because every company that I've seen doing this, where they started off for free to entice you in, then later on it just gets worse and worse. The prices go up, the software doesn't really change. In fact, often the software is significantly worse once it's running in a web browser, because it's running in a web browser. And the other thing you have to consider as well, on a lot of these services, once you've been using them on the cloud for a long time, and often you can only store the things that you create on their cloud servers. And that's fine when you've only got a handful of documents, but sometimes you'll end up with terabytes of data getting stored on these services, and then if you want to switch to a different vendor, that's no longer a straightforward process. I remember back in the day when I was running cloud-based systems, that we would always be chatting to customers to explain, well, what would happen if you do want to move to a different vendor, and it was a big thing that you should have the rights to move your data between providers. But that seems to have gone out the window for a lot of companies. There's a lot of companies out there where you would be storing a lot of data on their systems, and they don't give you any physical way to get that data back other than over your own internet connection. And sometimes, as I say, for terabytes of data, it could take months. Another problem that I've run into on cloud-based systems is where everything was running fine, and then suddenly they do an upgrade that you have no control over, because if they upgrade their systems and change the version of the software that you're using, that's part of cloud. It's part of the benefits of cloud-based services. Oh, your software will always be up to date. Yeah, thanks very much. It was running great, and now it runs like a piece of junk after the last update that you had, and you have no control over that whatsoever. And I've had that happen on several bits of software. So one of them, I had to completely come off the platform. It was unusably bad after a particular upgrade that they made, and I completely ditched the platform because of it, and I switched back to physical. I've been bitten by this a number of times, so this isn't an isolated thing. I am talking from experience here. All I'm trying to do is arm you with enough information that you can make a good decision for yourself and decide whether or not cloud is right for your business, and which bits of your business would benefit from it and which bits of your business really wouldn't benefit from it. For me, anything where I'm going to be spending a long time creating something on a computer, for example, Photoshop, Illustrator, SketchUp, any design software, anything like that, I do not ever want to run that off a cloud-based platform. I want full access to the software offline so I can run it on my laptop even if I don't have an internet connection, and if the company who wrote the software happened to go bust, but I still want to be able to edit and access those files, I still can, which you're not going to be able to do 9 out of 10 times on a cloud-based solution. Give it some thought, really careful thought, because this frenzy of everything going cloud-based for no reason whatsoever other than to make more money for already very, very rich companies is doing my head in. You need to weigh up the pros and cons, and you've got to understand the benefits and the drawbacks of going onto a cloud-based model for different aspects of your business. And if you're not doing that and working that out for yourself, then you're being negligent as a business owner. It tends to be all the really big players who are pushing you down this cloud route, so just be wary of that. But there's plenty non-cloud solutions on the market if you don't need to go down that route. If it benefits your business, do it. If it's not a business requirement, don't do it. I hope you found this vaguely useful. Pop in the comments below if you've had any horror stories of moving on to cloud, or if you've run everything on cloud for ages and you've never had any problems. Let's hear a balanced view on all of this. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I shall see you next time. Bye.